There are plenty of gaming franchises out there still trapped in Japan, never having released proper English translations. One VN series is called Memories Off, a franchise that has over 7 mainline titles and they're pretty much all available for purchase on Steam, but not in English. Even now in 2024, you can get them in Japanese, simplified and traditional Chinese, and that is it. That brings us to today's odd game. A new entry in the series is available completely in English. It's standalone, thankfully, so let's dive into the Western world's first steps into this franchise. Here is my review of Since Memories Off the Starry Sky for the Nintendo Switch. The story here is centered around Junya, a young man working for his father's handyman company. While doing jobs, he encounters a strange young girl that blames him for his brother's tragic death. He also becomes involved with a woman from China looking into old homes and his childhood friend Chihaya, as she plans to renovate her family's old estate. The plot is about him going about his daily life with all of this going on, eventually having to choose someone to help and to spend time with. As a story, it's pretty grounded in slice of life. Most of the plot is about days going by, occasionally doing things with characters in the common route, and even the heroine's romance routes have a lot of just doing things thrown in. There's a lot here, but the game is a bit on the slower side when it comes to pacing. The series has always been known to take its time in building characters and story, and this game certainly does that. Almost every event you see takes its time and drags on, sometimes longer than it should. I'd say overall the story is good, but not great. Most of the routes are decent, focusing on their characters save for one of the heroines having her own route kind of derailed for over half of it by a different character. Most of them are good though. My main problem here is the lack of romance. This game's built like a dating sim where you make dialogue choices so you can get onto a certain girl's route so Junya will fall in love with her. But the game just doesn't have that much in terms of flirting, going on dates, and romance in general. There are a couple scenes for the more important heroines, but even the romantic events it does have feel very surface level and don't amount to very much. From what I understand, this is right in line with what the old Memories Off games did. It just feels weird to go through a game built like a dating sim and not get much about their relationships, especially when the story spends so much time with its slow drawn out pacing for other parts. And while this may not necessarily be a bad thing, Chihaya's route also drags on for a very long time. It's easily twice the length of the other girls' routes, and seems to resolve itself multiple times, functioning more as an ending for the story as a whole than a simple romance route for her and Junya. It was pretty good with its story and writing, but it dragged on for hours past what it really needed to. It felt more like a combination of a romance route and an after story to tie up loose ends. Finally, the game's translation is good, but does have typos from time to time. I found well over a dozen as I played through a couple of the game's routes. None of them made things hard to understand, just incorrect or extra words here and there, but they do happen pretty often. When it comes to gameplay, this is a visual novel with dialogue choices. As you play, you'll be reading and watching story events, occasionally making a choice to help you get onto your chosen heroine's route. The first thing to note here is that this is not an H game. There are no sex scenes to be censored, and there really isn't that much fan service here in general. Well, at least outside of this particular piece of artwork that they put in for 2 of the game's characters. Main progression of this game is your typical VN stuff. You start on the common route, and depending on your choices, you can get onto the heroine's routes. But do note that if you're using a guide, you can get onto the routes if you make incorrect choices in the common route, but you're going to be locked out of getting the girl's best ending. So if you use a guide, make sure you get every common route choice correct so you can get the good endings. As far as features goes, this game has a lot of basic VN functionality like auto advance, skip text, log, saving, loading, and almost 50 different save slots. It doesn't have a lot of the more advanced features like skipping to choices or going backwards in the log, but it's got the basics of what you need. Though if you play the game by default with auto advance, it will appear to be agonizingly slow paced and sluggish no matter what you choose with the auto advance speed. To be able to fix this, you need to go into settings and turn the option for sync voice to off. This feature forces each message to only appear as quickly as the voice speaks, making auto advance even on fast or multi agonizing to wait for. but turning it off makes it flow much better. Now let's talk about how this game handles its routes, which is a little different than what I'm used to. There are 5 different heroines, and when you get to certain parts of the story, you branch into routes automatically. It starts with only Chihaya or Chunya, and you go onto their routes, eventually being able to split off into the other heroines' routes. Then you can start doing the correct dialogue choices to get an ending. Thankfully, the game will tell you which ending you get once it pops up on screen, so you know if you got a normal or best ending. This is important as some routes have very different normal and best endings, but others have the exact same ending, with the best ending having an epilogue scene the normal end doesn't. Now let's get into content and length. With the slow pace of the game and the franchise in general, you'll get a decent amount of time to spend here. I started by doing the Chunya route and managed to reach the end on auto advance with voice sync off after playing for around 13 hours. And going back to get the Chihaya ending doubled that to 26 hours, and that's without repeating the common route. That brings us to presentation. The game looks good with a lot of detail on the models and backgrounds. Some of the scenes do look a bit awkward, like how there's no mouth model whenever Masori is drinking the Hapiko drink, and the fact that they reused the same Masori wake up sock in your face CG 3 different times in the game's story, but it still looks pretty good. No problems with performance, thankfully, so let's go right into battery life. On the original and light model, Since Memories will last about 2.5 to 4 hours, while on the V2 and OLED models, it'll last 6 to 8 hours. In conclusion, Since Memories is an interesting game, offering a more grounded tale about friendship and tragedy, and the first Memories Off game to get an official English translation. Now, the downside, the game tends to drag its pace in places, has very little romance for this sort of VN, and there are a good number of typos and errors in the translation. But if you're okay with the slower pace, it's still a good VN that I enjoy playing through, just not a great one. Reviews to Go rates Since Memories Off the Starry Sky for the Nintendo Switch a 7 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.